Thank you for joining me on the show. I'm Mark Willis, and let's talk a little bit about what is going on with a record number of small businesses nationwide having trouble filling jobs. And now the president's new vaccine mandate for companies, these owners are facing a new burden. And I'm reading a report now that says from the National Federation of Independent Businesses showing 50% of small business owners are unable to fill jobs in August. The NFIB said the biggest challenges for finding enough workers to meet the demand and handling these supply chain disruptions. There's been a number of folks in the trucking industry that are commenting on all of this, and I do want to bring on board a new voice to the program, Joel Patterson. He is a workplace expert, and he is with the group, the Vested Group, in the Dallas area. And, Joel, I want to welcome you to the program, sir. You're live across North America.
Thank you, Mark. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Tell folks a little bit about the Vested Group before we get started.
Yeah, sure. We're a firm based in just outside of Dallas, Texas, and we're a technology services firm that works with a cloud-based business system called NetSuite, and would love to talk to anybody looking at growing and scaling their business.
Okay, very good. Thank you for doing this and talking about the latest here. Now, if you're an employer and some of your star employees refuse to get vaccinated or endure the hassle of getting tested each week, what do you do? And I'm going to preface that by saying that there's been a lot of comments in the trucking industry. I had Derek Leathers on yesterday from Werner, one of the nation's largest trucking companies, saying that it's going to add a lot of cost to the bottom line. What should employers do with this? How would they view this? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, it opens up a whole other can of worms, and how they enforce it, what the penalties may or may not be. Right now they're just looking at companies that are over 100 employees, so that at least excludes a pretty large portion of small businesses out there. But a lot of those companies that are over 100 employees are absolutely going to face additional costs. I mean, you have just the cost of tests and missing work, everything tied to that. But more importantly is what you keyed on just a minute ago. It's really about how difficult it is to recruit, hire, and retain people. And this is making it even more difficult with a lot of people and really creating some conflict that doesn't need to be there. I really go back to, I understand the intent of something like this, but one of the things that I struggle with as a small business owner myself is why does it ultimately come down to small business having to carry the burden of the enforcement or how this gets rolled out? Because it really doesn't have anything to do with the business. Even though you want healthy, happy employees for sure, it really isn't about the business. It's about the general safety in the country, no matter how you feel about the vaccine or the pandemic. It's a little frustrating at times how these things tend to roll downhill and ultimately land on the small business owner who has to absorb those costs.
Do you think it's going to be a situation, Joel, that a lot of companies are simply going to risk that $14,000 fine per violation and assume the government has no way of enforcing it? Is it kind of a Las Vegas roll of the dice, if you will, with that?
Yeah, any time that there's a new policy like this, I mean, small business owners will respond and find loopholes. I mean, there's going to be a mad dash to figuring out the best way to work around this policy. And the enforcement piece is, I mean, OSHA is responsible for it, who doesn't necessarily have the best reputation for efficiency, but they're the ones that are going to be responsible for this. They just found out about it last week, and now are trying to draft whatever kind of mandates are going to be out there, at least their proposals. I think deciding whether or not you want to pay the fine has got to be part of the conversation. When you look at the grand scheme of things, if I'm willing to pay that fine and yet not lose that employee, it probably costs me more than $14,000 to replace them. So, yeah, it's definitely going to be part of the conversation.
In tying into this, there's an article in the Wall Street Journal today, as a matter of fact, that big trucking companies are raising alarms over the planned federal COVID-19 vaccination and the testing mandate. There is a quote from Knight Swift Transportation CEO Dave Jackson, who says a testing mandate could slow deliveries and cut into work time that is limited by hours of service restrictions. A lot of the over-the-road drivers are subject to federal regulations concerning the operation of their job. Do you think this will have a ripple effect in maybe slowing down productivity, efficiency into these systems across the supply chain?
There's no question it will. It'll take time for the systems to respond. So, for example, you'd have different policies in place, I assume, for whether or not somebody's vaccinated or unvaccinated. So even just something as simple as that will require time. And then scheduling the appropriate tests. Everything that goes into this will absolutely have an impact on the supply chain in some fashion. Over time, people will get used to it and it'll become more efficient, but it's certainly going to, at some point, impact the cost of the service or the product that you provide. And so, when I talk to other leaders in different businesses, we kind of feel like we're in the same place we were a year ago almost. We felt like we were coming back, and now we're taking a step back with Delta, with mask mandates and the work-from-home pressures that some businesses have. I mean, it's really it's a good time to stay focused on your employee health and keeping them, happy employees, safe employees. That's good for business, and it's always the right thing to do. But unfortunately, there's so many things that are happening in the business world. It's hard to make decisions that we can rely on, not even for the next month, but just weeks, days. It's a really challenging time for the business world.
Talking about what's going on with the COVID-19 situation and the discussion going on about masking up, and a record number of small businesses, are having trouble finding workers to come in now. The president's new vaccine mandate offered companies, according to several financial reporting sites, CNBC, CNN, MSNBC, these owners of these companies are now facing a new burden. And on board to talk about it, I've got Joel Patterson. He is a workplace expert with the Vested Group. And again, Joel, the website for that is simply thevested.com. Is that right?
You got that right, Mark. Thank you.
Okay, very good. And again, thanks, man, for doing this. I mean, it seems like if you're a small business owner, trucking company, if you are maybe, say, in manufacturing, it's like juggling chainsaws out there today. You've always got to be on the lookout. Don't know when the next one's going to land on you in the form of government regulations, excessive costs, and things like that. You find a lot of small business owners are saying, you know what, I'm done. I'm just throwing in the towel. I just can't do it anymore with all this.
Yeah, I think there's more and more of that because it's not just what's already happened. It's not knowing what's going to happen in the future. Every time you think that it can't get any worse, and we've gotten through it, something else gets thrown at you, and it just makes it super challenging. Now, I will also say, people are in business usually because they like to work for themselves. They enjoy the challenge. If they are the type of person that enjoys solving problems, it's never been a better time to own your own business. So maybe keep that in mind.
Okay, no, absolutely. That's an excellent point out there. So I think one of the important things is that, in this day and age, like you mentioned, that companies have got to be pretty agile, maybe turn on a dime to accommodate things like this that come down the hill.
Yeah, and that's the secret to just about any small business. That's what makes them successful, even if they charge a higher price. I would assume that a lot of the guys that are listening, the gals that are listening right now and driving a truck are independent contractors. They have their own LLC. They get a 1099. They do all those things, and it makes me wonder for large organizations that employ a lot of trucking or a lot of drivers, whether or not they might start seeing a massive shift into rolling them out to be independent contractors and just hiring them on a per job basis or something. I mean, there's downstream impacts. Even if the vaccine itself doesn't impact somebody that's a sole proprietor, what happens at big organizations in their industry will certainly have an impact on their business too.
Okay, absolutely. So in other words, some may say, you know what, not going to do it. I'll be an independent owner-operator, get my own authority, and don't have to maybe deal with something like that. But if you're in a company, say that's got 10 employees or 100 employees or 10,000 employees, how do you keep this issue from dividing the office? How do you keep that, keep that division out of the workplace?
It's interesting because over the last 18 months, we've had a lot of opportunity to really try to control divisive conversations at the office. I mean, it started with social activism. We had the politics that never ends. We've got the vaccine, work from home issues. We've got masks. And so what I always encourage leaders of companies, when we hit one of these things, there's really just a couple of things you can do, because the answer is different for every business. Every industry treats their people differently. How you even run your business and whether or not you invest in culture is going to dictate a lot of how you manage this. But the important thing is to make sure that you are setting a policy and you're clear on what that policy is and what happens if they break the policy, because that's really all that they care about. So make sure that you're setting something that you can enforce. You're in Texas just like I am, Mark, and
yep.
When we go to a dinner and we go out, there's not a lot of masking up happening in most places. There is some, but a lot of businesses are just kind of rolling with it that way, and just, hey, we can't do anything that's going to make a difference. So let's just sort of go with the flow for right now, hope for the best, hope nothing else bad is around the corner, and just continue to make good business decisions and work through this until we're finally out of the pandemic kind of crisis.
All right. Are we in a good economic climate right now in your estimation? I know it's kind of an economic or dollar question, but what are you hearing from, like, your clients? Are they confident about the economy with all of the political firestorms going on, the mandates, this and that going on? Are they seeing good times ahead? How do they see it?
Everybody has an asterisk, and they say, well, as long as this doesn't happen. But I'll tell you, over the last 3 to 4 months, I'm hearing consistently from people that there is good, organic, consistent growth. Mm-hmm. So nothing that's crazy and driven by some wild stock market swings or the pandemic or anything else, but just consistent growth. And I'm seeing that in my business, in my clients' businesses. So I'm feeling pretty bullish about things these days, and I'll have my answers too, as long as nothing else crazy. Even though that's kind of a pointless thing to say anymore. I think the rest of the year looks good, and into next year as well.
Okay, how big is your company, the Besta Group? How large is it?
We're about 70 employees, so we're under the 100 restriction.
Okay.
So we don't have to worry about it yet, but we have we deal with the same issues, so it's absolutely something that's on our radar.
Okay, absolutely. And I was going to ask you about that. I mean, if you were over 100 in your firm, are you requiring masks and things like that? So are some of the folks in the group in your firm allowed to, not wear masks, or is it up to their discretion whether or not to do that at this point?
As of now, we are treating people like adults. I'm vaccinated. I encourage our employees to get vaccinated. We did an anonymous survey the other day, and we're kind of right in line with America. We were at 74% of people vaccinated. We have issues. Somebody will get exposed, and some people that aren't vaccinated will have to leave for a week or two. I hate it, but we're getting along, and without any major change, I think we're going to get through this just fine.
Okay, absolutely. All right, very good. That's what I was just wondering about, because I think it's going to vary from company to company as to, the policies with that, but more and more company leaders are stepping up and saying, this mandate requiring vaccines for companies over 100 is going to wind up costing a lot of money implementing these kind of strategies out there. There's a number of trucking company CEOs and chairmen that have expressed their viewpoints on that. All right, sir, I got to wrap it up. Thank you for a great half hour, and let's do this again. That is Joel Patterson, workplace expert. And Joel, again, the website where folks can find you, and I'm sure you're up on all the social media platforms, right?
Yeah, it's thevested.com, THEVESTED.com. Thank you, Mark.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Joel.